of Egsha Éireann Poetry Ireland. And this event has come together through a partnership with the Embassy of Ireland in Washington, DC, and the African American Irish Diaspora Network. And all three organizations are really delighted to have you join us. The title of today's gathering is The Fire Gilders, and it's taken from a poem by Ivan Boland. Ivan was a leading poet and voice in Irish literature and spent many years teaching as a professor at Stanford University. And she has really greatly missed both sides of the Atlantic since her passing last April. One of her colleagues in Stanford, I think her name was Diane Rogers, said of Ivan that she was radical and she was right. And that's why we think this is a perfect title for an event like this with the poets that we're presenting. So now, as you join us this evening in Ireland and this afternoon in the United States, we're celebrating the first day of Black History Month, which honours centuries of achievements by Black Americans, and we are also paying tribute to the Celtic goddess Brigid, Saint Brigid. So Brigid was a really courageous and powerful woman. She was a goddess of many things, but most importantly, she was the goddess of healing. And she was also the patron saint of very many things in Ireland, but most importantly, a patron saint of poets. So for us here in Ireland, St. Brigid's Day signals renewal, new growth, and an escape from the darkness. So the four poets you're about to hear will encapsulate this theme with the work that they're going to present, which is powerful and uniquely their own voice. And we know that you're going to enjoy them. But before we start, I just want to tell you a little bit about the poet and your compere for today, which is Clara Rose Thornton. So she is an award-winning essayist, multi-slam poetry champion, culture journalist, educator, and activist from Chicago. And we were really lucky in Ireland to have her live with us for 6 years. And while she was here, she was responsible for the first Black History Month in Ireland in 2014. And she also won the Dublin Slam Poetry Championship 3 times in a row and was a frequent RTE radio and television, as well as writing for the Irish Times and the Irish Independent. So she's back home now. She's focusing on education and the Black Lives Matter movement. But thankfully, she maintains really close ties with us here in Ireland. And so we're really delighted to have her compere today. I'll hand over to Clara now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that marvelous introduction, Neve. Hello, hello. Happy Monday, Brigid's Day, and beginning of Black History Month to all of you out there. It's marvelous, absolutely marvelous that you could join us here today. This is a very special, heartwarming transatlantic event. We are coming at you from all points across the Western world: Chicago, New York City, Texas, Dublin, all here together to commemorate and explore some very important issues concerning identity here today. Now, I would love to introduce to you the 4 poets that you're going to be hearing. I'm going to begin with Amanda Johnston, who earned a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from the University of Southern Maine. She's the author of 2 chapbooks, Guap and Lock and Key, and the full-length collection, Another Way to Say Enter. Her work has appeared in numerous online and print publications, among them Callaloo, Poetry Magazine, Puerto del Sol, Muzzle, and the anthologies Furious Flower, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry, and Women of Resistance, Poems for a New Feminism. The recipient of multiple artist enrichment grants from the Kentucky Foundation for Women, and the Christina Sergivana Award from the Austin International Poetry Festival. She is a Cave Canem Fellow, amazing, a member of the Afrolachian Poets, co-founder of Black Poets Speak Out, and founder of Torch Literary Arts. We're very excited to have her read soon for all of you. I would like to introduce as well Nithi Kasa, who has been making a mark in the poetry world since she was in secondary school in Galway, reaching the finals of Poetry Ireland's Poetry Aloud competition multiple times. In 2010, she won the Quirt Poetry Competition for schools. Since moving to Dublin in 2001, her achievements have included opening the Ovale series Make a Connection for the European Year of Cultural Heritage 2018. contributing to the anthology Writing Home, The New Irish Poets, published by Daedalus Press in 2019, and participating in the series Poetic Lives by Radio Near FM. In 2017, Nithi gave talks to NUI Galway and the Royal Irish Academy as part of the launch of Language and Migration in Ireland. Nithi, who grew up in the Democratic Republic of Congo before moving to Ireland, discussed writing poetry in a language that is not a mother tongue. Most recently, Nithi and her poem Charcoal Iron featured in the Adrian Brinkeroff Poetry Foundation series of poetry films in association with Poetry Ireland. Marvelous. Thank you so much for being here, Nithi. Next up, we have Kimberly Reyes, who is a poet and essayist and the author of 3 books: Warning Coloration, Dancing Girl Press 2018, Life During Wartime, published by 14 Hills in 2018, and Running to Stand Still, published by Omni Dawn in 2019. Her work is featured in various international outlets, including The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Associated Press, Entertainment Weekly, Time Magazine, The New York Post, The Village Voice, Alternative Press, ESPN, the magazine, Film Ireland, The Irish Examiner, The Echo newspaper, RTE, New York One News, the Irish Journal of American Studies, and many, many more. Kimberly Reyes has received fellowships from the Poetry Foundation, the Academy of American Poets, the Fulbright Program, Canto Mundo, Callaloo, Tin House Workshops, the Arts Council Ireland, Culture Ireland, the Munster Literature Center, the Prague Summer Program for Writers, Summer Literary Seminars in Kenya, and the Community of Writers. Excellent. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for being here as well. And last but absolutely not least, I would like to introduce Feli Speaks, who is a Nigerian Irish poet, performer, playwright from County Longford, currently living in Maynooth Town, County Kildare. Feli Speaks has been nominated Best Performer by Dublin Fringe Festival for her performance in Boy Child, co-written play by Dagogo Hart and herself. As well as being a member of Poetry Ireland's board, Felicia is a member of the poetry collective called We Are Griot. Feli Speaks' poem For Our Mothers is in the Ordinary Level English Leaving Cert curriculum, 2021 to 2024. Very impressive. Now, as you can see from the information given there in the bios, this event has brought together Black woman poets who also have Irish ancestry or Irish cultural histories within them, Irish cultural identity, as well as Black identity. Some of these issues will be spoken about in the poems you're about to hear and in discussions that we have for you. Now, I would like to introduce our first poet, Amanda Johnson, who will read some of her work. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Clara, and thank you all for having us, making this possible. I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm going to read 2 short poems, and the first poem, Enter, they're both from my book, Another Way to Say Enter, and I posted on my Instagram a photo. If you choose to see it sometime later, the poem is also posted there, but you can find it at Poet Amanda Johnston on Instagram. And accompanies this poem about the birth of my firstborn daughter. Enter. Near the end of the beginning, how life overlaps our edges. This is how one body forms the next, a world within a womb, pushing against translucent sound, heartbeat, breath. Amniotic whistle, dive into darkness, eyes tight against slick suffocation. Listen, a familiar scream. Come, push against the tightening rope, welcome pressure, welcome pain. Come upon the shore, still wet, still water, 1 foot in waves, arms stretched toward sound. Yes, here, you are here, stay here, call it. And the second poem I'm going to read is entitled Hand to Mouth. Busy hands split 2-day-old chicken in half. I pull spine and rib from meat. I make this small body, this bird new that must be fed again to hungry mouths at my table. Our wing loves who chirp on phones and laugh about whatever isn't killing them. I boil water, add worn chicken, and burn my fingers. A small sacrifice. Bone catches in my daughter's throat. This food I gift, a resurrected carcass, gritty with prayer to postpone dirt on the dying. Thank you.
Marvelous. Thank you so very much. And now we have Nithi Casa.
Thank you so much, Clara. And thank you, everybody, for having me. I'm going to read one poem called Gathering. It's just a short poem I wrote about my earliest memory of home and working with my grandmother, who was a farmer. So it just pretty much describes the place we worked at and the town we were living at the time. So it's called Gathering. The hills, spoon carved on the Grange's back, were red, a testament to hands that bled. We worked, a motog, a hoe, hands pulling the chives by their necks, gathering the herb that looked like meadows of rice from afar. Mud like gloves slitting the wrists where watches rest. Crops were styled onto the scalps of the fields like cornrows. Classed in baskets, a sale of 22, the rest for eating. We river washed, then walked home to a quietness. The bog lit lights, the stream lapping prayers, a church sweet on the upper tongue of the ground. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nithi. And now we have Kimberly Reyes.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, everyone who made this possible. A special thank you to Isabel at the Embassy in DC. And I'm going to start with a poem called We Are All Drowned Out. And I dedicate it to Neve Butler and Cove, who introduced me to the underworld in Cove and a haunted hotel room in the Commodore Hotel. If you respect the dead and recall where they died, by this time tomorrow, there will be nowhere to walk. Katie Ford. The journey from grandmother's grave, there, clipped, terrified, rhyme reforests, branch claws brazing, liminal glass, thin hours, 11 on I-95, careening coastline, ivory stroked asphalt, Doppler shifting the course, salted fogmire, green book guided memorial, over tire, unfinished books of harbor, South Carolina is hailing, scourge babies, who are the living, 5 Points, 290 Broadway, Seneca Falls, New York only second to Charleston in clawed auctions and wet markets, a diseased greed, a barren infestation, stunted seedling crops, crown weeds. Our windshield collects witching hour dew, sideswiping back to ports of call and subsurface cargo. Here, there's a crying blue child in Cove, I can only hear near the sea. And this next poem is called The Roost. And I'll just say, the number 45 in here is who you think it is, and I'm really glad to turn the page to 46. Hornets turned a corner, the fear, malignant air, a surprise to every nest, a venomless April, following the longest march on record. Survival, shelter, bloodthirst. 45's bees crust, twitch, rhythmic honey, suckling in vain, coursing over now, humdrum verse. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kimberly. And now to end up the first of two of our poetry segments, we have Feli Speaks.
Hi everyone. Yeah, this is exciting. Thank you so much for the invitation, and it's always a joy to be back at Poetry Ireland, whether it's virtually or in that amazing room of ours. So this piece is called They. I wrote it last autumn to kind of mark the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter conversation, specifically in Ireland. And to mark how much time we had to concentrate and really accept the realities of racism, basically. So yeah, this piece is called They, and I hope you like it. They tried to bury us. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds with shoots. We came from lands rich in soil. We've got roots. They didn't know our people cannot be afraid of the dark they fear, absorbing light to grow skin as thick as bark, as smooth as warm tarmac. They tried to bury us. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we can't be contained. They didn't know our bellies could convulse with laughter, clapping seal-like at the volcano of chuckles, hacking away at the neck of our throats. They didn't know we could launch forward in unison at our own jokes and still have gravity catch this fade. Yo, they tried to bury us, but they didn't know we couldn't die in silence. They didn't know we wouldn't come and go with ease. They didn't know our first mother had to deal with death, that she broke everything open with the black boy. She wet land with his blood and water first. She fed it and made covenant, let there be life. They didn't know our lives and deaths would make earth remember. They really tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were sound itself, therefore each a stunning beat, therefore each a music replicated by them. They didn't know our bodies have spat out their oppression in dance, in song, in rhythm, in blues, that our limbs have tasted and tested always the freedom that is ours. They didn't know it's gonna be all right, started with several head nods, a fist, and a frown. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we could do more than survive. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. Thank you.
Marvelous, marvelous, marvelous. Whew, all the goosebumps, ladies. Thank you so very much. All four poets who just shared their work with us, shared their heart and spirits and brains with us. Thank you. Now, for everyone here watching along with us, we have a discussion segment here before we're going to hear some more poetry. And to begin our discussion period, I just wanted to give a brief history of Black History Month in America, since that is one of the observances that has gathered us here today. In 1926, the scholar, historian, author, and journalist Carter G. Woodson, who had attended Harvard University and University of Chicago at a time when it was very difficult for qualified Black people to be admitted to such institutions of higher learning, he instituted what was called then Negro History Week. This was a primarily education and academic initiative to promote the learning of the achievements and real histories of Black Americans well before slavery, and yet that normalized as a field of education, as something that you could study and learn about in schools, which was not yet the case in the United States. And Carter G. Woodson decided to make Negro History Week in February to coincide with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln, who had signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, freeing the slaves, whose birthday is on February 12th. And with Frederick Douglass, the, of course, famed abolitionist and speaker, whose birthday is on February 20th. Now, in 1970, the first Black History Month was celebrated by Black students at Kent State University in Ohio. Negro History Week had definitely gained traction, and Black history in terms of our achievements and our impact in the world, time immemorial, that had definitely been gaining speed. But it was not until the first Black History Month was instituted at this university where it began to gain credibility across the academic landscape here in the States. And it gained so much traction that 6 years later, in 1976, the liberal president Gerald Ford decreed Black History Month a national annual observance. Now, when I lived in Dublin, when I lived in Ireland, I was one of the co-founding members of the inaugural Black History Month Ireland in 2014. And we experienced support, yes, but we also experienced a lot of backlash online and in person at events. There seemed to be a sentiment in Ireland at the time that such an initiative of learning about the achievements and the culture of Black people and the African diaspora across the world was not necessary in Ireland, that it was something that did not speak to Irishness, did not speak to Irish culture or Irish history, or was not a part of what Irish people should be learning or be concerned with. Of course, not everyone had these sentiments, but I definitely recognized a significant portion of people that shared those ideas. And feeling that I sort of straddle the two identities of the four poets that are here, meaning I have Irish grandparentage from Galway, but also grew up an African American, knowing that I had Irish ancestry, but then living in Ireland as well as a Black woman and experiencing the coalescence between those two identities. Now, it's an interesting spot to occupy. So I was wondering first, from the two Irish poets here, Felicia and Nithi, what has been your experience growing up in Ireland with any sort of incongruence that some people feel about Black or Irish or African diasporic identity and its mingling with Irish identity? Have you experienced backlash? I'm sure you have. I actually used to not like it when people say, does racism exist in Ireland? Yes, it does. We know it does. So wondering what has been your experience there with that coexistence of identity within you?
Ooh, Didi, would you like to go first? It's a heavy question.
Problem. I came to Ireland as a child, so I wasn't exposed, I suppose, till the world that we know now. I wasn't aware, conscious, the consciousness of the questions that comes with identity. I was at school. So the only thing that I would have experienced back then was kids being kids, I suppose. And the thing about race, if I have to say one thing, the first thing that I learned coming into Ireland, which changed my life and pretty much defined me after arriving here, is learning the fact that I was Black. It's something that I was not aware of before coming here. I was just who I was, and the color of my skin was never something that kind of lingered on my mind, or something that I ever thought about, or race or anything like that. But it became obvious that everything that I did, even at school, being the Black one, meant something. But I think it was more what I met here a lot was encouragement. You saw people were trying to include the Blackness within the Irish, and very often I was greeted with a lot of excitement to be the kid that you can kind of be there to say we're representing everybody. There is diversity. I think I felt that a lot, being the one that can be used as diversity. But as I grew up a little bit, I would say what you're saying about the backlash would be correct. Ireland is it has only been like somebody else said it to me one time at an event, maybe in the 90s, that we're beginning to see the Africans come here settling to a point where I meet somebody who's been here 20 years, 25 years. It's like, wow, have you been here that long? It really is new. And I just don't think the Irish are used to it. It's not the same as in America that we have generations of, it's something that is new. But it's yeah, it's new. I would say it will probably take time for the Irish to take it in as their own problem, because we have to, I always, when people ask me as well about the Irish, I always say there is similarities there in a way that the Irish themselves have suffered oppression. They have got a fight to focus on, and it's just the whole other people being the minority amongst them. It's something that we have to get used to. But to say about me and my blackness and the Black Irish month, I would for the people that I've met, there is definitely a curiosity there, I have to say. But for me, I think it has been positive. For the people that I have met, there is definitely a curiosity, which can feel, like I said before, being, finding yourself being the one who's being used as the diversity one. And that's the feeling. It's definitely there. Yes, for sure.
Mm. I think just to jump in really briefly on that end of Nitty's well articulated comment there, I was just thinking to myself that, like, I remember I was interviewed, and I remember seeing the interview come back up, and the headline that they chose to use, I'm sure if you're arsed enough, you can find it, was, "I'm glad I didn't understand racism as a child." And I thought it was a really particularly interesting line to pick out of the entire article of things that I was saying, but that it's probably quite accurate for me, that I think I only understood the heaviness and the layers of racism and identity as an adult, and I think I still am pretty grateful that I didn't understand that as a child. And I think many people like me, many Black Irish people that grew up here from childhood, are very like, oh yeah, that was racist, and had no idea or did not realize that the impact that situation in their childhood had on them was as a result of racism rather than as a result of people just being people. So that was like an interesting thing that I got, that came into my consciousness as an adult. But generally, I think in terms of how we understand racism in Ireland, I think we still have a long way to go. I dare I say, I think Black people have been in Ireland before the 90s, actually. And there's many people that pop up all over the place whenever we're going to a cultural event that are just being like, oh yeah, I was that person. And you're like, oh my God, how did we successfully bury all these identities? So I think, truthfully, Ireland still has a really long, gapped way to go in the conversation about racism, but I'm just glad we're starting it.
Thank you, Feli. One thing that Nithi said that I very much connected to was that feeling of being othered. You're being pegged as the Black one when you're just doing normal, everyday human things, is sort of, or being chosen to represent an entire people or an entire idea of otherness. I remember during my 6 years there, I was consistently asked to speak at events or read poetry at events where every other panelist or guest was, a straight white upper middle class individual, and I was supposed to represent everything else, literally just because I wasn't white. It was strange, the phenomenon. I got asked to speak about refugee issues, about direct provision. I'm like, I am from Chicago. I am not qualified to speak on these things just because I have melanin. Expand your idea of identity and what it means to be a member of the African diaspora. And that was something that I felt was, even in, the 2000 teens, was still a bit narrow there in Ireland. And it is expanding, it is improving. But as Feli said, there is a long road to travel still. But events like this and discussions like this do facilitate that process, absolutely. Now, speaking on the idea of otherness and the feeling of being othered as race and cultural identity fits into that, I would love to ask Amanda about your mixed race identity. We spoke briefly about how you are half Black and half Irish American, and you have more of a connection to your mother, your Irish American side, that side of the family. Is that accurate?
Actually, no. My connection to my Irish ancestry is my mother, but I have actually more of a connection with my African American family. But being here in the United States, you know, it was founded with racism, with otherness, through slavery, and all of the history, the entire history of this country, you know, has been steeped in that. So growing up and being a child here, you know, you're still pointed out, like it's not a melting pot per se. You know, I'm in Texas, in the United States, and there and in other places as well as here, there's still sundown towns where there are no people of color, very few, and whether it's, you know, it's not official, but it's an understood, don't be here after dark, leave. And, you know, but for me, as far as understanding or, you know, experiencing this world as a biracial Black woman, and I'm very intentional to say a biracial but Black woman, is because when we speak of whiteness here in the United States, especially, we're also talking about privilege. We're talking about some access to that, and that's something that's very far removed from me, that I don't have. When I enter the room, even if people don't know exactly what I am, what my racial identity is, they know it's not white. They know it's not, you know, just white, specifically Irish, you know, American. But, you know, trying to understand where you come from and what that means, I think because of the history in the United States, makes it even more challenging, because we can't assume, like, once you find out who your great-great-grandparents are. I recently found out who my great-great-grandfather was, and that he was born in Cork. Because of race, I can't assume that I would have been loved or accepted. And following my ancestry, really before 1975, that there was no one that looked like me in my mother's family. So I don't know what that relationship would have been like had I been born just even 10 years earlier than I was, right? We still had miscegenation laws here in the United States where my existence was illegal. If any of you have ever watched the documentary or heard about, you know, the Love case. So it's something that is still, you know, it's challenging, but where we are now and what you're seeing, you know, that's not new. It's a continuation in the narrative, right? Of equal rights, of social justice. There's still so much work to do, but there have been so many gains and so much beauty that we are able to start peeling back some of the layers and knowing that where there might be pain there, it's still beautiful and important to know who we are and where we come from, where that had been denied to us for so long.
Beautiful, Amanda, and all truths. Thank you for that. Now, I'd like to briefly ask Kimberly, I was noticing in your bio, you have so many literary connections to Ireland. How did that come about? Because you're based in New York City, correct? And are you from New York City originally?
Yeah, I'm a second generation New Yorker. I lived in Ireland on a Fulbright. So living there certainly helped with connections. And I just want to add on to what Amanda was saying, because I mean, and I saw a note in the chat about, you know, sundown towns being real still. And it's like, yeah, that's very much still real. I mean, in the poem I just read, I mentioned the Green Book. And, you know, I was driving from South Carolina knowing I couldn't stop just anywhere I wanted along the way to New York. I mean, that's a reality to this day. And also, I just want to quickly say on ancestry, you know, it's a privilege, right? To be able to know exactly who all of your ancestors were, what towns they come from. And that's a recent phenomenon for a lot of us. You know, Black Americans coming from, you know, the history of the enslaved, until like things like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, like a lot of us had absolutely no clue. And so it is complicated to look at like your DNA chart and go, oh my God, how much of that was like love, you know, how much of that was pleasant, you know, how much of that is inside of me. It's just this sort of reckoning that I'm used to people like I've been Kimberly Reyes my entire life, right? And my father's Puerto Rican, and I'm used to people like just not being able to comprehend like phenotype, DNA, biology. So, you know, the added complications of looking like at all the other cross combinations in my DNA, I'm like, I'm kind of a pro at it, you know, just sort of like being able to brush off people's preconceived notions of what you should look like based on your ancestry and your background.
It's fascinating how human beings have made such a mess, generally speaking, of what should be this consistent, celebratory, beautiful, fascinating learning about who we all are and the jambalaya of culture, and celebrating bits of all of the different cultures that are within us, ethnically and through lived experience and the places that we domicile. It should be this consistent, joyful knowing and expression of who someone is and all the various cultures within us. But we like to put things in boxes, and people with power like to say, well, this type is better than that type. And it's so arbitrary. And I know that saying something like that seems like an obvious observation about the world we live in, but it never ceases to amaze me how we have to continuously have these conversations, and really have only been able to be allowed to have these kind of conversations occurring and publicized and furthering these conversations. You know, we should be able to exist as we are and celebrate who we are and have other people celebrating it as well. My hope is that maybe in 3 centuries we'll get there. I don't know timelines. But we're going to go ahead and have a second round of poetic performances here from these marvelous ladies. First up for round 2, we have Amanda Johnston again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to read 2 more poems from my book, Another Way to Say Enter. I'll start with Facing Us, after Yusef Komunyaku. My Black face fades, hiding inside black smoke. I knew they'd use it, damn it, tear gas. I'm grown, I'm fresh. Their clouded assumption eyes me like a runaway guilty as night chasing morning. I run this way, the street lets me go. I turn that way, I'm inside the back of a police van again, depending on my attitude to be the difference. I run down the signs, half expecting to find my name protesting in ink. I touch the name Freddie Gray. I see the beat cop's worn eyes, names stretch across the people's banner, but when they walk away, the names fall from our lips. Paparazzi flash, call it riot. The ground, a body on the ground. A white cop's image hovers over us. Then his blank gaze looks through mine. I'm a broken window. He's raised his right arm, a gun in his hand. In the black smoke, a drone tracking targets. No, a crow gasping for air. And the last poem I'm going to read is I Embrace You, after Joy Harjo. I embrace you, my difficult and bright yellow joy. I embrace you, you are my dusk and dawn anew. I know you, my reflection, my face. I embrace you with arms I would open to a lover and a friend. You are my beating heart. I take you for the innocent who scream happiness loud as cannon fire. I take you in my mouth, clean water runs through my veins. I embrace you, joy, as you were born in my likeness through hands welcoming touch. I embrace you, I embrace you, I embrace you. I am not afraid to know sorrow. I am not afraid to feel pain. I am not afraid to laugh. I am not afraid to sing. I am not afraid to be other. I am not afraid to be here. I am not afraid to be light. I am not afraid to dance, to dance, to dance. Joy, you have spun me and I showed you my waist. You have held me and I release all my weight. You have cried with me and I watch our water join. I give myself to you, joy. You are the light on my face, the magic behind my eyes, my ears, my voice, my belly, my heart, my heart, my heart, my heart, my heart. Come here, joy. I am alive, and you are the reason why. Thank you.
Marvelous. Thank you so much, Amanda. Next we have again, Nithi Casa.
Thank you, Clara. I'm going to read a poem called Palm Wine Tapper. It's from the last, what issue was it, of Poetry Island Review, from issue 131. It's called Palm Wine Tapper. It's just I chose this because I think it pretty much reflects many of the poems that I write. It's mostly about storytelling. That would have been the way we lived from the town that I was born in. It's we have storytellings there. It's just it's big. So a lot of my writing would be storytelling, and this is just one of them. It's called Palm Wine Tapper. It is no woman's job, though no one ever said it wasn't. You learn it from your father. One cutter per tree. Interlock yourself with the prey by a rope, a gourd hunched on the hips. Opposing the cast, he swarmed the long-necked beauty right up to its crown, stepping on the scars to pose at the peak where working men could see him cutting the incubus of a tree. He did not fear the ice, nor the void life refused to fill, but leaned against the nothingness, trusting the rope, the ring of union. Mash the bunched fruits for oil, knife the trunk's neck for sap, the palm wine tapped tangy and breast meat-like. The forest would close. Farmers crossed a neighborhood, hunters in packs, clowning fishermen. The tapper crossed alone, silent. He sees all there is to know up there. A young girl watching the men of the village. I wanted to marry a palm tapper's son. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Nithi. Now up again, we have Kimberly Reyes.
This poem is called Beloved, and it's after Toni Morrison. More than Pop-Tarts, Bruce Banner, my mom's quick wit, our shared triumph, her beam still fighting, still lighten irises the color of her skin. Hearing her ignite through the voice of her dog, her delight in playing ventriloquist, for the sponge weathering the waves of the strange hidden meat he obediently observed. Her banter, her barking, lulled us. More than the smell of blood, peroxide, falling off my dusty pink Mrs. Pac-Man skateboard, the scent of soreness from our laughter, my grounding. I didn't know how much scars would count, how age would become collage without the speckled blood pavement. I could scrape the white off my fingernails, connect the dots on. How I'd mourned the dog she had to forget she buried because it was an accident, because of her baby brother who fought the hallucinations. Scarlet scenes, a beloved, too tuned to this world, sans small peach pills. The interruption quick, a paw wound for tending, small licks needing cleansing, a stove pot toppled over, a house left to bare bone. The exit simple, 2 wood boxes under red clay, caked cryonic fear when she buried her mother the coming year. The smell of boiled fur hanging, I still remember, the most innocent suffering, the most cruelty. I learned, she prayed. For her, the specifics melted away, hid in the merciful wings of dismemory. Panning out, painting a sigh, tethering a glance, she used to be able to do that. But survival required broad strokes, with the new slits of irons framing her nose, balancing the weight, my compass, struggling to see straight. And this last one is a short one after Gwendolyn Brooks, my favorite poet, and it's called The Blueprint. I sit with Gwendolyn. We shuck green peas over large rusty cylinders, over bent ashy knees. Deep in red clay, she smacks my hand. Stop fidgeting, child. Focus. She says the names don't matter. The taste, the planes, the lessons are the same. Distraction spends time, costs lives. Fill the bucket. Snap and stop for the sap of green. Snap and feel the round, the rise under forefinger. Snap without stopping. Snap, stop looking down. Peas aren't all seeds. Let the red ground eat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. And ending up our second and final poetic segment here, we have Feli Speaks.
Hello, everyone. Hi again. So this piece is called In Jesus' Name. And while I was thinking about some of the themes and ideas and what we're, performing about, I was thinking about a layer of being a queer Black Irish woman and the freedom, which is something that I've recently come into knowledge of, like consciously accepting being free within my Irishness to be as queer as I am. That's one of the liberating things about being Irish for me. So this poem is going to be self-explanatory, so I'm going to stop rambling and just perform it. Thanks. In Jesus' name. The sun will touch your face that morning. You will painfully stir in your sleep when you realize where you are. Your wrists will feel like drowned stones on a lifeless anchor. You will remain with your face nesting in your braids. The pillow will not smell like yours, nor hers. You'll catch your mother's scent and you'll panic. You'll hide the sweat gathering on your forehead, much like your father did when he prepared to tell your mother a lie. You will know she knows you are awake. She will insert your name in Jesus' name. She will scrub his over yours like a lathered iron sponge. I cover Ayomide with the blood of Jesus. You will hear her say. You will want to say, I want to be covered in the love of a woman. You will want to tell Mama that you covered yourself in a bath of your own blood. You died so you may live and love, that you tried to save yourself with 1,000 cuts, tried to help Jesus save you, tried to bleed out your sin in a slow crucifixion. You stir with these truths in your hospital gown. The sun licking your eyes open like a faulty envelope. You will see her standing there beside your mother. You'll recognize the low hum beneath Mama's prayers as your lover's cry, your best friend. You will feel your 4-year secret just as heavy in your chest as any other day. You will weep to the whispers of her amens. Your mother will think the Holy Spirit is here, that he's flowing through the room. You will seize the moment to scream, holding all the hands you need to catch the wail tumbling from your voice box. When you are finished, you will resign to silence the lamb slowly slaughtered. Your lover will return to her position with a cry like a hum. Your mother to her prayers. In Jesus' name. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Felicia. Should I say, Feli Speaks, speaking so well as you do. Now, in the spirit of Brigid's Day and the sheer power of the feminine, can I get an amen? All right, some of that Black Chicago, gonna bring it. In honor of Brigid's Day, which has gathered us here together, I would love to have each of our featured poets here talk a bit about the women who have inspired them as writers and as humans living their life, going through your endeavors, actualizing your ambition, trying to make your mark on this world. Which women have inspired you, historical or current? I would like to start with Amanda, please.
Absolutely. Well, the last poem there that I read, I Embrace You, Joy, after Joy Harjo, I was very, honored to have Joy Harjo, who is our current U.S. Poet Laureate for a very rare third term, which is phenomenal. She is a First Nation woman and an incredible writer and artist. But I was privileged to have her as my faculty mentor in grad school. So it was an honor to work with her and be deeply rooted in cultural work while I was writing and finding my voice, continue on the path of finding my voice. So I gotta give it up to Joy Harjo, but also Cave Canem. I mean, you mentioned that in my bio. I am a proud Cave Canem fellow and recently served on the board of directors. But the women who make that organization run, Toy Derricott, along with Cornelius Eady, founded it, but Toy Derricott is so generous in spirit and word and just, she puts it all on the page. And if you've ever had the opportunity to be in her presence, you know that comes from a very vulnerable and generous place in her heart. So I'm thankful for this moment. Thank you for asking that question so I could say their names, Joy Harjo and Toy Derricott.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Now, Nithi, you have some women inspirations to share with us.
There's so many of them. So many of them. But in literature, in poetry, if I have to say, the very first time I've read something and I went, wow, was Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. And I watch it over and over and over again. I get the same feeling of her when there was a video there, she performed it. I think she was on stage, and it's just the energy, her words. And I went to look at her story, her life, and everything about the woman from a very young age until her death was just, she was an amazing woman. I say, I will probably never be as great as she is. She was writing wise. I mean, her poetry was just something else, but just the woman would have been, for me, incredible. And if I have to name somebody else who wasn't a poet, would be Winnie Mandela. And I think about Winnie Mandela, very often we forget that there is no Nelson Mandela without Winnie Mandela. And she pretty much just reminds me of the role of the woman, how important we are, and how we hold society together. And there really is no anything. We say it's a man's world, but I think when I read about Winnie's story, it just kind of reminds me of all parts and all role really within the society, within the marriage, and the strength of a woman with all her errors, her beauty and everything. It's just what she represented during that time. I would say she's one of the women that I found quite remarkable, and there are a lot more. I can go on and on and on, but I think I'll leave it with the two of them. Thank you.
Marvelous. Agreed on both fronts. Absolutely. Now, Kimberly, would you like to share with us yours?
Sure. Gwendolyn Brooks, who I mentioned in my poem, is the number one influence for me. I started my career as an entertainment journalist, and she is known as the verse journalist. And a lot of her work draws in from historical events, and she sort of tells it like a reporter would, with bringing in factual details and just making this beautiful, expansive poetry. And so, for sure, she's my biggest influence. But I'm also really influenced by essayists like Lucy Greeley. It was a poet and essayist that I really, really adored. And Camille Dungy, who I have the honor to know, is just amazing. And she's just as generous in real life as she is on the page. And I kind of find that some of the most talented among us tend to be the most beautiful in real life too. And I always find that really inspiring.
Marvelous, marvelous. Thank you, Kimberly. And last here with your women inspirations. Felicia, would you like to share with us, please?
Yeah, I have quite a few, and I was going back and forth as to like who would I pick, but I thought to go with the first woman poet I'd ever heard online, and she's actually from Chicago as well. She's really cool. Her name is Jackie Hill Perry. The first time I ever heard her drop crazy bars, I was 14 years old. My jaw was like a gap open, staring at this woman on YouTube, just kill it. It's funny because our lives are like really different. Like she started off queer, ended up Christian, but like I'm still obsessed with her. Whereas I started Christian, ended up queer, but you know what I mean. Yeah, she's amazing. And who else would I say? And I would say my community, actually, my friends are really inspiring. My mom is inspired, like things that she comes up with, or that that comes out of her mouth. I'm like, oh, that's a poem. So yeah, I would say the people around me, my community, predominantly. But after that, I would say Jackie Hill Perry. You guys should check her out.
Amazing. Thank you all so very much for that. All incredible women that were brought up here, just such inspirations to anyone trying to see more clearly the beauty and power possible in every day, and to internalize that and act upon it. All of those names are such incredible inspirations for those setting upon that path of self-actualization, recognizing one's own power, and recognizing the beauty that you can make once you recognize your own power in this world. And before we move into closing remarks here, we are unfortunately running out of time. I would like to make one quick disclaimer there. When I said, can I get an amen? I was not attempting to proselytize to anyone. Black American culture is very closely tied with church culture so often. And I had a pastor for a maternal grandfather and grew up in the church. So even though I've moved more towards Buddhist philosophies and sensibilities, sometimes I just still, when I get excited, I'm like, ooh, I'm feeling the Holy Ghost. You all have made me feel the Holy Ghost today. And thank you so much for that. That's just a universal expression of just feeling filled up with light and buzzy inspiration. So thank you all so much for that today. I wanted to just contextualize very quickly here, with this being in honor of Brigid's Day, just this idea of rebirth, and bringing a sense of rebirth to ideas around identity, I think was a big part of this conversation, and which was very important. And in terms of the Black History Month aspect of today's event, I think one thing that I would love for everyone to take away with is watching here today is that we need to do away with these ideas of purity as regards identity and culture. Talking about how someone can't be a pure Irish person if they have brown skin, or if they are from Africa, or, Kimberly talking about having a Puerto Rican father. Perhaps there's people that have these ideas of, oh, well, you're not a pure Latinx individual because you're also half Black, etc. These illusory ideas of purity within identity, they purely just exist to uphold and create and uphold power structures. So let's do away with that, and let's celebrate who we all are, this beautiful jambalaya, as was mentioned in one of the beautiful poems here today. Thank you all so much for listening. And I have been Clara Rose Thornton, your MC for the evening. And I would love to turn this over to the embassy representative here, who has a few words for us. Emer Rock.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, ladies. That was absolutely phenomenal stuff. I don't know, wow, that's all you can say is wow. And it's a real pleasure on behalf of the embassy, along with the African American Irish Diaspora Network and Poetry Ireland, just to say thank you all for your work. I think some of the discussion, as Clara Rose has said, it touches on old hurts and new hurts, and I think this is this fusion now of powerful women, Black History Month, St. Brigid, and mixing it all together is just proving just what happens and what you can do if you bring all of these things together. And this is part of our celebration of St. Brigid, who is also known as the Exalted One. I think we've all been exalted and exhilarated tonight listening to the performances and the discussion, I think, and just watching the comments just pop up on the screen the whole time is just incredibly affirming for all of us, I think, that are involved in any of this. I'd like to thank Ragnar and Isabel in our embassy who pulled it together, along with Niamh from Poetry Ireland and her team, and the African American, I have to always say that one slowly, African American Irish Diaspora Network, and Dennis Brownlee and his team there. Nothing more to say than Laila Breathe Hannah. Happy St. Brigid's Day, everybody. There's a concert tonight that you might be interested in, also celebrating St. Bridget, and our ambassador, who you may know for his tweeting his poetry, will also be tweeting Irish women and women poets over the next month as well, in honor of St. Bridget. So thank you all. It's been fantastic, and thank you all for making this so special. Clara Rose, Nidhi, Philly Speaks, Amanda, and Kimberly, we are just truly honored to be with you here tonight. Thank you.
Our absolute pleasure. Thank you so much to the organizers and everyone for booking tickets and listening in and watching. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep the empathy going. Let's keep the togetherness going.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just thought I'd pop in and say thank you again. I felt like Clara's by herself there.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'll say another thank you to everyone.
Brigid, watch over us and keep the good stuff flowing.